All right. What's up, everybody? My people in Manhattan, the Boogie Down Bronx, Queens, or Staten Island, my homeborough, Brooklyn. Now, in the Super Bowl week, I'm going to be doing this video on one of the stars of the Super Bowl for the LA Rams, Mr. Aaron Donald. Now, I was watching Skip and Shannon Undisputed, and Shannon Sharp said Aaron Donald's a top 5 defensive player all time. Already. Aaron Donald's been in the league since 2014, so he's been in the league for 8 years. Is he already a top 5 defensive player in NFL history? Absolutely not. And let me be very clear. Let me be crystal clear. I ain't no Aaron Donald hater. Excuse me. I'm not like Skip Bayless, who all say some dumbass shit talking about, oh, in 5 games against my Cowboys, Aaron Donald only had 1 sack. So, like, bruh. Like, Skip says some of the most dumbest shit ever. But, yeah, it is what it is. Aaron Donald's a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. Lawrence Taylor and J.J. Watt, they're all tied for the most ever in NFL history. Aaron Donald, I believe, is the only defensive tackle to get 20 and a half sacks in the season. He did that back in, 2018? Aaron Donald, to me, he's not a top 5 defensive player ever. No, there's one defensive player I have ahead of him. And I'm about to show him in a minute. But I'll say this. As a defensive tackle, he's probably 3rd. If he wins a Super Bowl, he'll surpass, for me, Johnny Randall and Warren Sapp. He's not going to surpass Mean Joe. He's not going to surpass Alan Page or Merlin Olsen. Merlin Olsen, for all you don't know, he played for the Rams back in the 60s and the 70s. He was an all-time great defensive tackle. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's on the 100th anniversary team. He's more famous for being on the Little House on the Prairie. But, hey, he was a hell of a ball player. But Aaron Donald gets a ring, he'll leapfrog all those guys and jump to 3rd. But nobody will ever surpass Mean Joe and Alan Page to me. And I'm going to get to those guys in a minute. But first, let me start with some defensive players who I think are better than Aaron Donald. Let me be very clear. This is in my all-time rankings in numerical order. These are just some names I thought of. Of course, the great Lawrence Taylor. Outside linebacker for the New York Football Giants from 81 through 93. Won 3 Defensive Player of the Years. Was the 2nd defensive player ever to win league MVP in 86. He got the first player to get 20 and a half sacks in the season since sacks were counted as official statistic in 1982. He was a 10-time Pro Bowler, 8-time first-team All-Pro. He was Defensive Player of the Year and Defensive Rookie of the Year in the same season, 81. He transformed the New York Giants. He took the Giants from being the laughingstock of the NFL in the 70s to the most dominant powerhouse teams of the 80s and early 90s. That great 3-4 defense, and of course led by the great Bill Parcells and the defensive mastermind himself, Mr. Bill Belichick. When he retired with 132 and a half sacks, he's perhaps the greatest linebacker in NFL history. He's definitely the best outside linebacker in NFL history, and perhaps the greatest overall linebacker and the greatest overall defensive player in NFL history. And you can make a case that he's the greatest NFL player of all time, pound for pound. Now, for me, I would say Tom Brady, and then I'll probably have Jerry Rice number 2. But if someone said LT, I wouldn't really argue with you. Next is the Minister of Defense, the late, great Reggie White. God rest his soul. He passed away in 2004, I believe, of a heart attack. Played in the NFL from 1985 through 98. Retired and came out of retirement, played for 2000 with the Panthers, and that was it. He retired as Pro Football's all-time leader in sacks, 198 and a half. A 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. In 1987, he had 21 and a half sacks. In 1998, he was 37 years old. Defensive Player of the Year at 37 years old. Unbelievable. Reggie White was a dominant monster. He was 6'5", 300-some-odd pounds, and strong as hell. I seen this dude, Reggie White, just lift up Larry Allen with one hand. Larry Allen is perhaps the greatest offensive lineman in NFL history, pound for pound, and Reggie White picked him up like he was nothing and put him on his ass. Reggie White, he had 3 sacks in the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots, you see right here, which is a Super Bowl record, by the way, since been tied by numerous other players, but Reggie White's the only one to do it in a victory. He could have got Super Bowl MVP, but they gave it to Desmond Howard. It is what it is. Reggie White, if you count his years with the United States Football League, the USFL, plus his years with the NFL, he's Pro Football's all-time leader in sacks with 221 and a half sacks. 221 and a half sacks? Are you kidding me? And mind you, Bruce Smith has 200. Bruce Smith, if Reggie had spent his first 2 years in the NFL instead of the USFL, there's not a doubt in my mind, Bruce would never got that record. Love Bruce Smith, who I'm about to get to in a second. Bruce Smith played in the NFL for 19 seasons, 85 through 03. He's the NFL's all-time leader in sacks, 200. 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 1990 and 1996. 1996, of course, he helped the Buffalo Bills get to 4 consecutive Super Bowls. He only played in 3 of them because he didn't play in the second one against the Redskins. Bruce Smith, to me, He's kind of underrated because he played in the same era. He came to the NFL smack dab in the middle of LT's prime, and then Reggie White's first year in the NFL after being in the USFL for 2 years was 1985. And plus, LT has 2 rings. Reggie White has a ring. Bruce does not. But Bruce was dominant. Don't get it bent. He was one. He was a dominant pass rusher. Member of the 1980s and the 1990s All-Decade team. Okay, Bruce was dominant, but even though he's the Pro Football's all-time leader in sacks, he's still kind of underrated. Isn't that something? The all-time leader in sacks is still somehow underrated. 6'5" and quick, very quick. If you watch him on film, watch him on highlights. Okay, that man was very quick. Next up, Mean Joe Greene. To me, the greatest defensive tackle in NFL history. I'm sorry, love Aaron Donald, but I don't think he'll ever surpass Mean Joe. What Mean Joe Greene is to the Steelers is what Babe Ruth is to the Yankees. When the New York Yankees got Babe Ruth from the Boston Red Sox, thank you, Boston. That's what led the Yankees to winning all those championships and led them to become the greatest professional sports franchise on planet Earth. The Pittsburgh Steelers are one of the golden franchises in the NFL, and it started in 1969 when they hired Chuck Noll and drafted this man right here, Mean Joe Greene. 4-time Super Bowl champion, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. He was the steel curtain. He was the heart and soul of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'm not a Steeler fan. Matter of fact, I can't stand Steeler fans. But but on the outside looking in, he's the greatest Pittsburgh Steeler of all time. He is the Babe Ruth of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He made them one of the golden franchises in the NFL. Everything. Okay? Sorry, I love Aaron Donald, but I don't think Aaron Donald ever surpassed him. Next up, Deacon Jones, the man who White Joe Greene wears 75. Deacon Jones coined the term sack. He was a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 60 and 69. Now, when Deacon Jones played, he played in the NFL from 1961 through 1973. The NFL didn't have sacks as an official statistic. Like I said when talking about Lawrence Taylor, it didn't become an official statistic until 1982. But Deacon Jones unofficially led the NFL in sacks 5 times, which is a record. He unofficially has 173 and a half sacks. Deacon Jones is a monster. Is Aaron Donald above Deacon Jones in my opinion? Not yet. But if he were to win the Super Bowl, I would have to put him over Deacon Jones as the greatest defensive player to ever play for the Rams. I know people may think that's sacrilegious, but that's just me. Deacon Jones was one of the members of the Fearsome Foursome, along with other Hall of Famer Merlin Olsen, who was a defensive tackle for the Rams. A great player. Next up, Dick Butkus, probably the most ferocious, and the most feared and intimidating player in NFL history. A 6'3", 200-some-odd-pound linebacker in an era where linebackers weren't that damn big. Butkus instilled fear, legitimate fear. There's so many stories about him. One story I heard of, which was, kind of gross, but also kind of, it was weird. He hocked a loogie when the center snapped the ball. He hocked a loogie on the football. I mean, Dick Butkus is one of the most badass players to ever play. Now, his career got cut short because of injury, because he had knee injuries. He only played 9 seasons, but in 9 seasons, he made 8 Pro Bowls and won 2 Defensive Player of the Years. And one of those years he won it, the Bears were 1-13. Watch some highlights about Dick Butkus. This dude was an absolute monster. And I pity the fools who were tackled by him. And listen to how some of the NFL legends speak about Dick Butkus. Deacon Jones once said, "Roses are red, violets are blue. If you got any sense, keep Butkus away from you." Next up, a dynamic duo who played for the Baltimore Ravens for years together, Mr. Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. So let's start with Mr. Ray Lewis. He played 17 seasons, went to 13 Pro Bowls, won 2 Defensive Player of the Years, helped lead the Baltimore Ravens to 2 Super Bowls. He's the NFL's all-time leader in combined tackles with 2,059, solo tackles with 1,568, and he holds the record for most sacks in a most tackles in a season, 156. Ray Lewis is perhaps the greatest middle linebacker in NFL history. To me, he is. I have him slightly ahead of Butkus and, over the guys like Jack Lambert, so on and so forth. But, a leader, he's Mr. Raven. He's the greatest Raven of all time. Imagine that. The first 2 picks in the history of the Baltimore Ravens franchise were Hall of Famers and All-Century team players, Jonathan Ogden and Ray Lewis. Ray's he's to me the greatest defensive player of his era, late 90s to the early 2010s, throughout the 2000s, early 2010s. Ray to me was the best. And that's not even to mention his teammate, Ed Reed. To me, the greatest free safety of all time, and it's not even really close. I mean, 64 career interceptions, the most interception return yards, 1,590. He had 9 career postseason interceptions, which is a record. He has the longest pick six in NFL history, 108. Defensive Player of the Year in 2004. He's the only player to return an interception, a fumble, a punt, and a block punt for a touchdown in the same season, doing so in 2004. He led the NFL in interceptions 3 times, 2004, 2008, and 2010. And in 2010, he missed like the last 4 games of the season. He had 8 interceptions in 2010, and he missed like the last 4 games of the season. And he still led the league. Think about that. Ed Reed was the definition of a ball hawk. And he could also drop the hammer. That's one of the things I just underrated about Ed Reed. He could drop the hammer. And he's one of the smartest players in NFL history. Ask Bill Belichick about Ed Reed. Next up, Mr. Ronnie Lott. The only man in NFL history to be first-team All-Pro at cornerback, free safety, and strong safety. He moved to safety in 1985. In 1986, he led the NFL in interceptions with 10 interceptions. Just an intimidating overall presence. He was the heart and soul of the 49er defense. The 49ers looked as a soft team, a finesse team. They're in California, and they had Joe Montana, and they were offensively driven. Don't worry, this team could pack a punch. And Ronnie Lott was one of the main reasons. I mean, man chose to have his pinky amputated so he wouldn't miss the season, so he could play in a playoff game. Ronnie Lott is just a monster, man. And he's perhaps the greatest all-around defensive back in NFL history. We're talking about corner, free safety, and strong safety. Next up, Dion Primetime Sanders, baby. Played in the NFL from 89 through 2000. Came out of retirement, played 2 seasons with Baltimore in 04 and 05. He finished his career with 53 interceptions. Dion is the reason why we have the term lockdown corner. He's the greatest corner in NFL history. It's not even close. He's first-team All-Pro 6 times in the 90s at cornerback. Also a punt returner and kick returner. He's probably the greatest raw, natural athlete to ever play in the National Football League. He was Defensive Player of the Year in 1994 with the 49ers. He helped the Niners win the Super Bowl in 94, and they helped the Cowboys win the Super Bowl the next year in 95. Like I said, he invented the term lockdown corner. I mean, all these guys, Pat Peterson, Darrelle Revis, Champ Bailey, Ty Law, all these guys, so on and so forth. The reason the cornerback position is taken so seriously is because of Deion Sanders. Now, you had greats who played before prime time, like Mike Haynes and Lester Hayes and Mel Blount and so on and so forth. But Deion, he's the ultimate shutdown corner. Another all-time great corner, Dick Night Train Lane. Playing the NFL from 1952 to 1965. He has 68 career interceptions, which I believe is 4th on the all-time list. 4th. They called him Night Train, but because he was scared of flying, so he would take the train for every game to wherever his teams were playing at. But also, he would come out of nowhere and drop the hammer on the opposing team receivers. A 7-time All-Pro. He led the NFL interceptions twice, and he holds the NFL record for most interceptions in a season, 14, and he did that as a rookie. He had 14 interceptions as a rookie. And I don't think these guys, all those guys think are better than Aaron Donald. Now, the rest of these guys right here, I would probably put Aaron Donald above them, but you can definitely make a case. Alan Page of the Purple People Leaders. Played in the NFL from 67 through 81, won 2 Defensive Player of the Years. He was the NFL MVP, not just Defensive Player of the Year, but MVP of the NFL at defensive tackle. Leader of the Purple People Leaders. Like, this dude, Alan Page, was incredible. 6'4", with a great speed, great quickness off the ball. Watch tape of Alan Page, man. I would probably put Page over Donald slightly, but it's close. And but Page unofficially has 148.5 sacks. Unfortunately, he played when they didn't have sacks in the official statistic, but freak of nature. Okay, honorable mention to Derrick Brooks. Derrick Brooks played 14 seasons in the NFL, 1 Defensive Player of the Year. Won a Super Bowl with that legendary 0-2 Buccaneers defense, an 11-time Pro Bowler. I would probably have Donald over Brooks on my all-time list slightly, but you could definitely make a case for Derrick Brooks. Honorable mention to Rod Woodson. He finished his career with 71 interceptions, playing the NFL from 87 through 03. Won Defensive Player of the Year in 1993, part of the legendary 2000s Baltimore Ravens defense, which he played free safety at. He led the league in interceptions in 1998, or co-led the league, I should say. I would have Donald all-time have Rod Woodson on my all-time defensive players list. But Rod Woodson, this dude, a great corner, a great safety, and a great punt returner as well. Kind of like Dion. Not just be great at, kind of like Dion and Ronnie Lott. Can play any position at defensive back and also could return a punt, a kick, a threat in the return game. And of course, the late great Mr. Junior Seau, rest his soul, played 20 seasons at middle linebacker for the Chargers, Dolphins, and Patriots. Was Defensive Player of the Year in 1992, a 12-time Pro Bowler. Unfortunately, he never won a Super Bowl, and unfortunately, he took his own life I believe May 1st of 2012. So we didn't get to see him give a full Hall of Fame speech. But Junior Seau, talk to anybody who's ever played with Junior Seau. They say he's the nicest guy in the world, the greatest guy in the world, and he was a hell of a football player. Probably perhaps the best linebacker of the 90s, which is saying a lot because you had Derrick Thomas, you had so many other great linebackers in the 90s, but Seau was probably the overall best. I would probably have Donald over Seau all time, but it'd definitely be close. But hey, tell me what you guys think in the comment section down below. Is Aaron Donald the greatest defensive player ever? Is he top 5? Is he above any of these guys? Give me your top 5 defensive players of all time. All right, see y'all.